So today's show, we got to talk about Atlantis and the mystical origins of civilization. I mean, there's so much here we got to talk about, man. It's going to be amazing.
Awesome. Are we doing this?
You know what? We're doing this. We came this far. After several technical difficulties and delays, we came this far. But in the tradition of our last shows, I had to wear this funny hat. I had to wear the pharaoh's headdress because on the previous show I'd worn the Phrygian cap crown, and you were thinking to yourself, "What the hell is this guy doing?" And you even put in the topic of the show, you're like, "Funny hats." Wearing strange hats. But no, this hat very much relates to the topic of what we're talking about today with the ancient progenitors on this planet, because there's some clues here. When we see the headdress, this is just symbolizing essentially the same thing that we see with the halos or the nimbus that we see in the ancient world. It's basically the auric field. The guys like Stephen Curlian with Curlian photography have captured, but the real hint of the rulers on this planet is right here. That when we see the serpent, there's a huge hint about what that means. And
before we go there, I want to say I've never felt this before, Johnny. But as I looked at your headdress just now, as you just started, I go, "Oh, duh! It's as clear as day. This obviously originated in Atlantis."
Yeah, well, the principle is,
Yeah, well, Egypt was an outpost.
Absolutely.
Egypt was, the Giza Plateau was a satellite. It's like if we have a military base in, the Philippines at Subic Bay. Well, Giza was an outpost like that. It's disappearing now? That's it? That's all we get?
Yeah, it's hot. It's a fashion statement, but now it's one that's got to come off. Now I got the hairs all pushed down to look like I'm from Greece or something. But no, you're absolutely right. It is. Egypt was an outpost from the ancient Atlantean missionaries, and as we get into it today, I mean, it's one of the things that we most certainly got to explore. But there were serpent rulers upon this planet for a very long time, and when you look around at the clues, it's overwhelming. We see the caduceus. Have you ever seen this symbol?
Well, I think everybody has, and then it's reduced to some kind of caricature in our modern-day ambulatory lancing systems, ambulances.
Absolutely. I mean, it's essentially the medical symbol. And, of course, when we relate it over to DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid, and we look at the experimentations of Francis Crick some 50 years ago, or his theories that he was aided by LSD, by the way. He came up with the concept of DNA, and of course we break it down into the codons. We see that within this symbol are these two serpents. And as they're climbing up, the spine essentially, and this is of course going back into what Kundalini is. That's right, exactly, that energy. It starts to awaken with the swan wings on the two sides of the brain, the left and right hemisphere, opening up into the pineal gland.
There's an actual space that we don't, Hansa. The Hansa is the Sanskrit word for swan, I think. Mm-hmm. And it literally is this space in our brain where there's fluid that has the shape, and the ancient yogis would call it the Hansa, the swan of the soul, because it has that shape. It's like where the pineal gland hangs, and off to the sides it has the shape of two wings, kind of like there's an empty space there. From what I understand. That's
exactly it. And I mean, there's so many clues here when we look at why do we call ourselves humans? Why did the Druids worship the Hu beings? And how that relates essentially over to the Naga serpent. And when we start to look at even why we have Earth, and we're going to get into that, talking a little bit about the Anunnaki and Anki and Enlil, and going back into the Sumerian stories. But many have heard the saying in the Bible, be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. Why did St. Patrick chase out the snakes? It wasn't really talking about snakes in Ireland. These were the serpent beings. And even if you go back into Bhopal, India, very, very interesting clues we get from Bhopal, India, by the way, and you go into this in these caves, we start to see these serpent rulers all through.
Does he have a dragon head there, a serpent head?
Oh, yeah, and you see the serpent coming down. This goes into the Vedas.
Show it a little closer. Do a little close-up of his head into the camera. Okay, interesting. Yeah,
okay,
yeah. Cool.
So we get into this. But what's also interesting, that when we look at these caves over by Bhopal, India, which come from 3800 BC, by the way, or 5,000 years ago, we start to see where the origins of the Union Jack, the Star-Spangled Banner, or the Devonshire Seal, the Topaz of Sachi, where you see the lion and the unicorn that we see, that it's in England, when you go over and look at the Buckingham Palace, or even in Canada or England. With this,
that's on the shield of the palace. Those two big emblems or shields. Yeah, shields. Right. The what do you call it? Crests.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're right on there.
And we even go back over into the Oracle of Delphi with the Great Hydra. The serpent goes back all the way through human history. In fact, it's one of the oldest things worshipped. There's 70,000-year-old caves when we go back into Africa where we see there was serpent worship. And people will say, well, were these serpent beings? Why is the serpent mentioned in the story of Genesis? Well, the serpent beings not only were wise, but they had this sort of immortality that they could shed their skin, as we see it. They had this sort of intimidation to them as well. They were crafty. But there, of course, is the symbolism of the Kundalini in the spine. And as we get into today, one of the greatest secrets is this Kundalini energy that we draw. It's why there is 33rd degree. There's 33rd degrees in Masonry, why you have 33 vertebrae in your spine, and why you want to draw that energy up and awaken it, just like the pharaohs, as they had the serpent coming out of the pineal gland or the third eye.
Because on their headdresses, you'll see it's a cobra holding itself up, sometimes, right? And it's kind of bent up, and it's coming out right of their third eye. And this is, where the spine, it comes out, it can break through, and it's a symbol of that arisen Kundalini. That's why that's on the headdress. Yeah, it's really cool. I want to, as an overview here, and Jesus says too, that ancient dragon we fought somewhere, doesn't he say that? The ancient dragon. Now, this is usually reduced to, that's demonic, the dragons are evil only. And that's not the position. We're going to go a little deeper today than just, the reptilians are demons, We must kill them. Because this is ultimately fighting a part of ourselves. We have a reptilian brain. As a human being, you have a reptilian brain. It's the first part of the brain. It's sort of like, as the medulla oblongata, or that, it's the last thing that dies. It's where your breath is held, right? It's where isn't this interesting? That snakes constrict, the ones that are not poisonous. They constrict. They're boa constrictors. Pythons are constrictors. They play with the breath life force, the chi, the prana. They play with it. When I was having my awakening, I just want to catch this before we get past it or I lose it. So we're not going to demonize only. We're going to try to learn to discern today between, when people ask you, well, are the ETs good or bad? My simple answer is usually, are humans good or bad? Oh, you mean there's both kind? Yeah. Are reptilians good or bad? Well, are humans good or bad? You need to learn to discern in the moment, That's what this is about. We're not demonizing the simple, uneducated, naive, meaning not developed, approach is, I touched the stove once. It's hot. All stoves are evil. You can't do that. That's why we joke about cats. That's imprinting. That's instinctual. Humans have a cortex, meaning learn to discern, separate the wheat from the chaff, separate the truth from the real from the unreal. While I was going through my awakening in 1993 or something, big awakening, I had a beautiful blonde. You know, the boas are white and yellow. But that phase, the when they're almost albino, they're not quite albino, but they have a yellow. That boa showed up in a vision in an altered state for me, and he basically was constricting me, killing me. Every time you breathe, when you breathe out, he goes, okay, I got you tight there now. You can't open back up. That's how they do it, right? Each time you breathe out to try to catch your breath, they lock you down, and eventually you can't. Even talking about it, you can feel it, right? I can. So he was doing that to me in this visionary state. And he said, but I'm going to teach you something. He gave me a grok and an aha. He said, I am the master of the life force. Hello, Kundalini, Caduceus, Eden, the Pingala, that's the life force rising. And he said, if you relax and surrender to me, I'm going to teach you something. If you resist me, you're going to have a panic attack. But if you, and he showed me his control over the life force. And this is why we've created serpents, this way. There's the poisonous thing, but this constricting energy. And he just showed me how I'm a master of life force. And I actually got a pet snake. I was never into snakes. Somebody didn't need a snake he couldn't keep anymore. We built a 6-foot terrarium, my friend, named the snake Jupiter. He was a corn snake, beautiful orange, yellow, about 5 feet. And I used to feed him. Spirit told me, I want you to feel this. Master of the Kundalini life force. So I had a pet snake in a beautiful terrarium. People thought it was just for plants, and there's a glass had a waterfall in there and all this stuff, right? They go up there, and I just wait and see how long it would take them to figure out, oh, there's a snake in here. Oh, my God. I used to feed him live mice because I was a good little spiritual boy. Oh, that's all evil. I'm Mr. Yogi. I'm Mr. Vegan Yogi. Oh, that's icky. No. Get the fuck real. Shiva is the master of this force, of the Nagas, which you probably know more about. Yeah, but they gave me this thing to understand, and they would make me watch while he kills the mouse. Feel it. Don't interpret and project your subconscious and conscious belief system on it. Feel what's actually happening. And my snake was so respectful that my ex-wife came over, and I was like, part of me was like, oh, I want to shock you with I'm going to feed him a live mouse. He was so respectful the only time in 2 years when he actually went inside his little cave, which looked like these dinosaur bones, because she didn't want to see it. And that's the only time he killed the mouse and ate the mouse, swallowed the mouse, inside his little cave, so she didn't have to see it. He was completely respectful of the snake. So for us to judge, I suggest tonight, open it bigger. I've met brother reptilians, and there's some nasty ones, archonic controllers on this planet that are worshipped by some of the elites on this planet. The 14-foot blonde reptilian that Kissinger, like I mentioned before, kisses his ass on the starships, on the moons of Jupiter, or wherever they hang out, anywhere they want. And those guys, yeah, they're evil in the sense of they're soul controllers and they feed on soul louche energy. Others are your brothers in arms. They are your buddies from other lifetimes. They fight for freedom. Learn to discern is what we're after tonight. Not broad-brushed fear porn. All reptilians are bad. That's bullshit. Some are. Some humans as well. So I just wanted to mention that from my point of view.
No, I think that's well said. People have to discern the terminology here. They have to look at this from different perspectives, because if you come at this strictly from a religious angle or that of a belief system, you might not be able to decode it, especially when we look at things like the Bible. I always tell people the Bible is essentially an encoded document. There's more than one way to read the Bible. You could read it 3 different ways. You could interpret all sorts of hidden meanings. There's Latin in there. There's Greek. There's all sorts of different angles that have been put in there on purpose, as it's been translated by the papal decree, as well as during the time of King James, which I'd like to touch down on today. But I also wanted to discuss with you our recent trip to Ireland. We came so close to seeing each other. We just missed each other by about a half an hour. Did you love Ireland as much as I did? I mean, I was in love with the place.
I did. It was awesome. It's beautiful. I just want to say again about the reptilian thing, because if you don't discern, then you either worship them, like Kissinger and his crowd, the kind of evil Illuminati crowd. There's a good Illuminati crowd on the planet too, by the way, folks. You'll end up worshiping them, or you'll end up hating them. You'll make them a messiah or a devil. Either way is not discerning. You're not ultimate discerning, So that's not what we're doing here with nagas, snakes, reptilian gods, because there's people that then worship them, and that can get equally fucked up.
Oh yeah, and just before we touch down on the topic of Ireland, since you brought up reptilian gods, I've heard all sorts of different stories about reptile aliens. And I've most certainly heard from Jordan Maxwell that over the years he's had some very credible cases come to him about reptile aliens from people in the military, from architects and people in high-end developments, that these are not the type of people that would lie, even preachers and pastors of churches that have come to him and told him about their experiences with these giant reptile beings. And Absolutely. It's my belief that anything that we see on Earth, any sort of creature, whether it's an avian or an insect, we hear about these insectoid alien beings that people encounter. Even Sergeant Clifford Stone was talking about them recently. It's possible for any of them to evolve. So it's
felines, dog people.
Oh, yep. Yeah. Out in the multiverse, and most certainly in our universe and other dimensions, there's all sorts of different intelligences and beings, many of them bipedal, many of them in a humanoid form. But most certainly these beings that were associated as being the serpent people or our serpent rulers, this is a certain class that we have to look at. And many of our secret societies on this planet have been aspiring to take the steps to be like these people, to retrace their steps, to hold on to certain mental exercises and keys and degrees and secret studies in order to tap into the secret mysteries of the ages in order to attain these sort of powers. So that's what I really want to do today too, is we could most certainly look how this relates to extraterrestrials coming to this planet, teaching us and establishing themselves, but also how this relates to these mysteries.
Angelic lives matter. Reptilian lives matter. I'm joking, but there's a big galactic melting pot here. Just like America, on Earth, we have different types of races and frequency beings. Well, that's galactic. And so, to demonize any one of us is myopic. It's short-sighted. It's prejudicial. So all the different races in the galaxy, and there's certainly a bunch of reptilian races. Now, they tend to be bipedal, exactly, and humanoid as they evolve, as they come out of being dinosaur or, lizard, snake, lizard, upright sort of dinosaurs and evolve. They go into, as the cerebral cortex grows, you get the lion-headed goddess Sekhmet, you get Sobek, the crocodile-headed one in Egypt, you get dog people, you get avians, of course, which lately are popular, or they're revealing themselves again with the work that Corey Good and David Wilcock are really doing, in my view, a yeoman's awesome job of beautifully bringing forth. So all of this is shocking a little bit to see, but that's also why in Egypt you have you have Horus, he's an avian. Let's get real. Horus has the falcon head, There's eagle-headed gods. And this is not that we have those are forms. So all these forms have been melted on Earth. We have reptilian, avian, mammal, different insectoid forms. And that's why it gets so weird for most people with the ET thing, that they say, there's the praying mantis, or there's a reptilian, or there's a feline, furry, because it's true. I mean, Star Wars is really, the more we evolve, we realize George Lucas was channeling the galactic, thing, you know what I mean? That really does exist. So it's about learning not to war again. The galaxy is going through a upgrade. just like Earth is, meaning we're going to, in a sense, now there's time loops and you insert yourself in different times, so all things are available. But in this particular time on Earth, there's an upgrade about, can we all get along? Or can there be some kind of interesting melting galactic pot going on as well? And now the reptilians, I wanted to point out, they have been here so long. We all know the age of dinosaurs went on for millions, I don't know how many, 250 million years or something. It's a long time we have dinosaurs. And so some of the Dracos feel they own this planet first. And they have a good case. In some galactic court, they go, look, we were here 250 million years before these weirdo, soft-fleshed freaking humans showed up. We own the place. They're Johnny-come-latelys. They have a good argument for that. So a lot of them feel that way. A lot of the, quote, bad ones that run off-world, multi-dimensional, I think they're actually puppeteers of the Archons, to be honest. The Archons they don't really like the Archons, the reptilians, but they work with them or, through them. The reptilians basically feel, we're the bosses, you guys suck. That's their attitude, the ones that are negative, quote unquote, right? Because they have power. And then there's humans that got seduced by them and go, yes, these are our gods. Well, then the Pleiadians showed up and other humans went, no, we like them, so we're going to make them our gods. So we want to aspire to be like the Pleiadians, and others want to be like the reptilians. So this is a deeper game going on Earth, various secret societies, and there's an ancient battle. Jesus, he must have tapped into all that and said, the ancient enemy. What's that actual quote? I forget. Our ancient fight with the dragon or something.
Not against flesh and blood, but against the cosmocratorus, principalities and powers of darkness in higher places.
But he also mentions actually the dragon there. So I think he was feeling into there's been an ancient battle on Earth, millions and millions of years, between basically what we call angelics, the Pleiadians, right? Or the Andromedans or the Arcturians versus the reptilians.
And isn't that amazing? I mean, people have been talking about angels on this planet for so long, and when we look at where angel comes from, angelos in the Greek, it's a messenger. And, most certainly all throughout the ancient writings that we read about them. But
an interface. Feel deeper into that word, Johnny. I know I'm Mr. Mystic here, but that's what I like. Feel angelic. So there's a messenger, but it's also an interpenetrating. It's literally intercourse, not in the pure sense of that word. They're intercoursing. They're not just giving a message. It's actually energetic injection. You understand?
That's exactly it. And before we leave the topic of serpents, because we're going to come back to them today, I want to also discuss with you the Negus again in a way that maybe you'll be able to touch down on here a little further. With David, the fellow that introduced me to you a long time ago, he has taken some of these ayahuasca retreats and experimented with going into the self and various shamanic practices. And he said that he had encountered the Negus serpent or the Earth Guardian. And many others have discussed this too. Have you seen this in any of your retreats? Have people talk about the Serpent Guardian of the Earth? The mother?
That's why people, from our Western perspective, because of the the serpent shall bruise thy heel, and you shall bruise his head, that ancient enemies between humans and reptilian energy, right? Mm-hmm. And so that got inculcated and scripturized in stone, right? With that in Genesis. Well, that affects us collectively. It's a piece of black magic or light magic, depending on what you believe in or what side you're on, right? That there's enemy with the reptilians. So we have inculcated or imprinted, improgrammed into us this deep revulsion almost against the reptilian for humans, right? Mm-hmm. Horses will shy away. I watched Bentley once down in Tucson where we were staying at a hotel. It was a dark path up to this waterfall in this resort. And it was, and his kids, kind of some young, drunken kids and stuff going up to the waterfall. And Bentley, all of a sudden, he's about, I'm just holding him on a leash. He just reacts. And there's a fat diamondback rattlesnake.
Wow.
Right on the path. If he hadn't been there, And we were also there to warn the kids because they were just gone. They would have walked. And that snake was laying right in that path. They were going to have to come back there. There's a deep revulsion imprinted in with a reptilian thing, and I forgot what I was going to tell you about that.
Well, I think it's absolutely incredible that we have these experiences in our spiritual awakenings, that these are encoded into the history, into our histories, and we see it all through the mystery schools. But
and ourselves, yes, exactly.
Yeah, and also when we go and we look at Ireland and we start to see the gunstrip cauldron that people talk about that was located over in Copenhagen, that's connected to the gulls, and we'll see it in Celtic mythology as Cernunnos, and he's holding the snake or the serpent, as well as the infinite sign with the cross-legged position showing the position of the yogi, or there's a connection there to Buddhism.
Isn't the bottom of him reptilian sometimes? Like his legs for the gunstrip
cauldron.
Yeah, okay. See, I don't know that. But
well, what's very interesting, all through there we see hints. And when you were recently in Ireland, you guys went to
you were asking about ayahuasca. You were asking about ayahuasca. I'll come back to it, yeah.
Oh, yeah, well, it's all connected. It's all connected because, I mean, even the entheogens on this planet have given us clues, cosmic breadcrumbs, back to our conscious, back to sort of they link into other areas in our ancient consciousness technologies, as we see with shamanism. But what I wanted to talk to you about with Ireland is you guys were over at Castle Ruddery Circle over in Wicklow, weren't you? Mm-hmm. Or by Wicklow?
Let me I got what you said. Let me do it. So I set up that whole thing about that we have enmity with the reptilians. So it surprises people that the vast majority of people in shamanism with ayahuasca or others will see the snakes. If you don't see the snakes, it's unusual. If you don't enter the dimension of hundreds of snakes intertwining, the actual moving of the cosmic energies, their first form is sort of snake, reptilian. So the reptilians have a good argument. We were here first. Then you grew little feet, became a lizard. You were still us, but we just added feet. And then finally you guys think you're almighty because you're evolved into these things. But they have a good argument, right? So we have to appreciate it. So most people do have ayahuasca herself. Her most common form is as an anaconda. And at some point in the evolution, after a number of ceremonies, it's a well-known initiation ceremony when she eats you.
Interesting.
And we, of course, have oh my God, that's evil or wrong or that's reptilian. That's so deep in us. So it's a bit shocking for most people that they encounter often, even though right now, as I'm saying, and Aya is also pointing out to me that she is adjusting this, you understand? In the Amazon tradition, the jaguar, the colored bird, Quetzalcoatl, and the anaconda are three major archetypes for shamanic tradition in Amazonia, because those are the jaguar is an obviously ultimate hunter and so forth, right? And so is the anaconda. And then they have the condor as the overarching. Those are major archetypes, which she's actually saying I'm adjusting, for the Western people. I do in the first form she showed up for me 10 years ago was as a young maiden, more like a Greek young maiden, but with copper-colored hair. Now we're going Irish. Red hair. And green skin. And I knew it was her, but she takes all those shapes, but her most common, if there's one common default shape for Aya, it is as an anaconda giant constrictor, and the anaconda is the least controllable constrictor on this planet. You cannot make pets out of anacondas.
That's very interesting, especially since you see this shape-shifting quality and the energy that moves. And our planet has chakras. The ancients knew this. It also has its own kundalini energy that moves through it. And so the fact that it would be alive and awakened, especially in these experiences, I think is truly fascinating. But one thing over in Ireland, where you guys were, in those beautiful pictures I saw of your group where you guys were out there and you were doing a spiritual workshop, because I know you fly all over the world and talk on these amazing topics.
Very grateful.
Yeah, a friend of mine, David Halpin, had taken me around the area, and he also gave me this book, The Sun Circles of Ireland by Jack Roberts, that maps these areas out. What's very interesting, how those places connect into these great mysteries, is that not only do we know that there were a group of people, the Tuatha Dé Danann, or the Tuatha, that came to Ireland. Now, some will say that's the people of the goddess Danu. Others will say that Danu was added in the 19th century, it came from the Danes, or Danemark. However, we know that they essentially came in flying ships, and that they had come to Ireland and instructed them, and they were these very mystical people that came from Tirnanog or Avalon, which is really probably just what was remaining of the Atlanteans. Later on, of course, we hear the stories.
Hyperborea, is that part of it too? Hyperborea?
Well, Hyperborea, as I was going to mention in a bit, is sort of the proto-Atlanteans. We could see it with it was sort of before the Atlanteans started to really put things together. But as we discover today, as we go further into these mysteries, the name Atlantis is almost a distraction, because it's not just one place. I mean, this was a great distribution of culture, and I definitely want to go further into that. But there's one very interesting thing that when we see in Ireland, there's a site there that will just blow anyone's mind if you go there. I mean, you saw the Hill of Tara, which is a beautiful, amazing, incredible, magical place. And right beside the Hill of Tara, of course, we know there's Newgrange. Now, Newgrange is like the size of a shopping mall, at least 5,000 years old, at least 3,800 BCE. And what we see at Newgrange is it's beautifully constructed, precisely constructed, so the inside of this thing is in a crux formation, like a cross formation. And once a year during the winter solstice, there we bring in the idea of Christmas, and Mithra and Dionysus, and the Horus myth, and how we look at the precession of the equinox and the sun and all the different sun myths. We see that the sun comes through a little portal that lights up this chamber, and it's in the cross shape. We also see this exact sort of construct in different parts of the world, that these were put together by a race of ancient builders. And think about why in masonry you call yourself a builder, or you become a master builder, or a grand architect, because these terms, as we look at them, are essentially going back to our great progenitors on this planet, and they have left clues for us all over the world. Things like Stonehenge. We know that Stonehenge was not built by the Druids. The Druids discovered them. When Julius Caesar, he came to England, he said, Veni Vidi Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. What he did is he came in there and he said, yeah, this is great. This is cold as shit. I'm getting out of here. I'm going back into Italy. I'm going to go have some nice Italian food, and it's warmer there. It's nice. I'm out of here. And let's just take what we need. But when he came there was already a Ludon from the sun god, and the Romans called London Londinium. And that, of course, became London. But there's some other interesting things when the ancient Romans were there, of course. Some fun facts really quickly. Of course, we know there were already these type of pubs. And back in those days, by the way, guys, if you were in London, ancient London, in those times, you wanted to leave at a certain times, because everyone threw the toilet waste out the window at a certain time. And some guy that had a terrible job, he would have to take these kind of brooms and go down the streets and get rid of it all. And so that's why you have the expression getting shit-faced or pissed, because if you came out of the pub too late, you would have that. Another area that if you ever look in London, we see Piccadilly Circus. Well, Piccadilly, a dilly was a prostitute, and you would pick a dilly, or you don't want to be dilly-dallying around if you were talking about the wives.
So that's where the girls hang out at Piccadilly.
Absolutely. But what's very interesting that we see in Roman records, they contradict Julius Caesar, because Julius Caesar in his records, he wrote that the Druids had built Stonehenge. And we know that that is nonsense, because in Roman records, even in the Druidic universities, there's a different story, that they were instructed in all probability by the ancient Chaldeans, that came there. And some will say, well, okay, maybe it's the Phoenician Canaanites, but it was one of those groups that came in there and re-instructed them because they were relearning everything and how to use these things. The Druids said, we found Stonehenge. We didn't know what to do with it, but they had to be instructed with people that had earlier knowledge because about 12,000 years ago, we know that there was a flood, Younger Dryas cataclysm, that just flooded everything out, wiped it out. The Chinese have records of it. Even the Genesis story, we start off from the Sumerian creation story that was brought into Genesis with this great flood. And of course, if many of you have followed Graham Hancock's new work, Magicians of the Gods, he talks about this. Robert Schoch talks about this. But I think it's fascinating that we have these breadcrumbs all over the planet.
As you're speaking this, just feel that, everybody. Johnny is so awesome about painting that. It's fun to see the bigger picture. But as you're saying this, I can really feel how we've had it obfuscated, veiled. We've had it veiled, this history. As we're speaking, there's these ancient races, and all Moses says about this, there were giants in the day. But there was an antediluvian, not meaning anti like against, but ante, meaning that in the anteroom, the foreground, the foreroom, there was an antediluvian world, meaning before the flood. And Moses basically reduces that to nothing, A couple of lines, there were giants in the day, don't worry about it, we've moved on. But there's a whole giant story of Earth, including, you watch Conan the Barbarian, and you go, shit, there's something true about that. Some ancient weird time that was like after some cataclysm. You've got these insertions of different societies and whole civilizations. The Mayans inserted themselves, and then they did the elder shift and took off through time because they're a race of people that time travel through the galaxy. They did it, and then they left the natives behind who kept trying to do it. But as usual, once the Elvis has left the building, the imitators kind of suck compared to Elvis. So there's a lot of insertions of civilizations. I saw one in my last ayahuasca journey as well. I was literally a 9-foot, 12-foot red-haired giant, and sort of a proto-Viking. And I'm just talking to my Viking friends about it. And we're tapping in. These are real stories. The Greek gods, the Viking pantheon, these are real things. These are beings. These are real histories that we've had to relegate to myths. But they're not myths. I've met Horus. Horus is a real being. People say, that's just myth. That's not myth. We've had to make it myth to get to this place of shutdown. We have to hit bottom to bounce back up. So basically, when Nietzsche says God is dead, we've been as disconnected as possible, and Stalinism and Maoism takes over the world. It's such a complete removal from the fairy kingdoms of Ireland, or the mysteries of the Nagas in the Himalayas, or the conehead tall beings in South America, or wherever it shows up, the Australian Aborigines pantheons, or the Kachinas of the Hopis, the Katsinas, the star people. These are all they're real. I grew up scientism. I've seen physical manifestation of 2-foot gnomes without doing any drugs, full on daytime, okay? Not entering the visionary space another time. Yogananda's not lying. St. Francis is not lying. St. Teresa's not lying. Ramana Maharshi's not lying. None of them are lying. Jesus is not lying. They're having real multidimensional, timeless, omnipresence experiences. Horus is alive today. Jesus is alive today. They're both resurrected or awakened beings. And then you want to worship your God over others, and then the battle begins. This versus that, So, this is a much, just feel this, whoever, if you listen to this, feel the larger history. Now, the pyramid is a monumental, it's a monument, probably the most amazing monument on the planet, a monumental fuck you to false history, or a monumental conundrum. The fact that you have water erosion on the Sphinx, undeniable water erosion the last time it rained in the Sahara was 15,000 years ago. And it takes a while for water to erode stone. So that thing's been around. I actually trust Dr. Paul Brunton, who wrote the book A Search in Secret Egypt and Secret India. If you've not read those, Johnny, you'd love it. That was Manly P. Hall time. Do you know that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. And Robert Schoch also has released some excellent work on that.
And he's a brave enough academician that actually, when you speak the truth, like Graham Hancock or Robert Schoch or guys like that, or Michael Crema, who never went academia route, but they're willing to say these conundrums. The conundrums will reveal the larger history of Earth. Just feel it. There's a much bigger history. And talking about Atlantis, Egypt is a afterbirth of Atlantis. All the Giza Plateau is an outpost, not that special deal. Atlantis was the motherland of what's left of the Giza and the super pyramids and all kinds of waterworks and star alignments and obelisks that are Tesla-type transmission of free energy across the planet. These were actually antennae. The ridiculous Washington Monument in Washington, D.C. is completely fucking dead compared to a rose granite solid obelisk that's 500 tons, laser cut with psychic consciousness and sound, light, energy that we can't even describe in our current language, but is then set up that do hyperdimensional physics, free energy for submarines and flying craft all over the planet, which is what happened in Atlantis.
Absolutely.
At the Temple of Dendera, those fucking craft, those are Atlantean craft.
Absolutely. We see in the in Abydos, absolutely. You see these inscriptions.
Yeah,
when we look over at the Atlantis story, really we draw that from Plato's Timaeus and Critias. So in these, we also see...
That's Raphael's School of Athens painting. That's a small piece, folks. He just showed you Plato and... Who are the two guys? Plato and...
When we look over, when we had the various dialogues of Plato, Socrates, and of course...
The two guys on that cover.
And so with Critias, though, this is supposed to be his uncle. And we learn about the story essentially coming from Solon, which was a distant relative Solon was essentially in Egypt. And I love what Solon says in a nutshell. He's basically, I'm going to paraphrase it here, he's like, the priests in Egypt said, silly Solon, you think that you guys are this most sophisticated civilization, you Greeks. Well, there have been many deluges on this planet. There's been so much destruction. Things have been wiped out so many times that some forgot to write it down. You guys are just the last remaining survivors that came about. So there's been this destruction, and these deluges have happened so many times. And there's something Stephen Mailer taught me recently that is just amazing. I love Stephen Mailer. And I think
cut you off a little bit. It's been watered down. Many deluges. The history of Earth has been watered down. Totally.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just the last ones. The Atlantean thing. Or the Egyptian thing. Yes.
Absolutely. And by the way, I want to give Stephen Mailer, Brian Forrester, and the Chematology School a great plug. Patricia Arwen, Yusuf. And they had learned from Akeem, of course. They're just incredible. And the reason why they call themselves chematologists is because chemet is the ancient name for Egypt, and that's why we have chemistry, because the ancient Egyptians were really into science and so much more.
Doesn't it mean alchemy?
Absolutely.
As well? The word alchemy.
That's right. Inner alchemy as well. But when we see what Mailer talks about, Mailer says you need to throw out linear evolution, especially when we look at all the theories these days, as I want to get into really quickly here, that we're looking at anthropology of what it teaches us. We need to throw that out. And we need to go to cyclic evolution and see this is why we've evolved differently, why there's different animals in different parts of the world. We have the crow in North America, or we look at the magpie over in Europe, or why we see humans at different stages, why the world is in different stages. Okay, we have this cyclic evolution. And if you're looking at the old model, it's not going to make sense. The other thing is that when you look at Egypt, you have to peel back the layers like an onion. You have the Islamic layer. You go back past the Greek Alexandrian layer, the Thonis Heracleon era, the Ptolemaic era. You peel that back. We go back to the Persians. We peel that back. We see that all these areas, we had all these inscriptions on everything in Egypt. And most of them are left by the last civilization. Even the forgery of Khufu at the Great Pyramid. All that's bullshit. When you go back far enough, what you're going to see is there's no inscriptions and there's no language. And this is going to blow everyone's mind because the reason is, according to Stephen Mailer, is we're dealing with a telepathic society. We're dealing with these great progenitors that wore these amazing hats because they had the elongated skulls. That's why you find over in China, you're going to find these great pyramids with Caucasoid giant mummies. You're going to look all over the world and you're going to see that there were a group of progenitors that arrived here a long time ago and were instructing people and building ancient monuments and going all over the place. But here's another area that gets quite controversial. I want to bring another author into this before we go back into the Atlantean theories, before we go back into these progenitors. Right now, there are really...
Progenitors, just explain that. It's meaning they came here, and it's like the movie Prometheus with Ridley Scott, that white being in the beginning who dissolves himself into the stream. They came and seeded planets. They are the first races that first came into the solar system from elsewhere and seeded the humanoid game, all our DNA, all of it. They they were generating first. So that's what we're saying when we're saying the progenitors.
That's it. And actually, there's two stories of the account of Genesis, where most people look at the Genesis story in the Bible. And by the way, again, I recommend Bullinger's study Bible if you're going to ever look at a Bible. In this story, of course, we see most of us look at the story of Adam and Eve, and we'll say, okay, well, Eve was created from a rib. But in the original rabbinic Jewish version, that Adam and Eve were one person. It was ADM, which is a race of people. And it was generally a hermaphrodite being that was split in half into two parts, which we see all through the occult philosophy, and all the secret orders will look at this two gender, split gender philosophy, and that's why we look at these issues so complex.
And we are moving back towards that. In case we haven't noticed, the tide is rising towards Bruce genderism. We joke about it. God bless Bruce Jenner. But it's like this remembering that Shiva is both Shiva and Shakti. This beautiful picture of Shiva, they just show it. We just do it. It's the female and the male together.
Beautiful.
So these are the actual beings that we are. And so this is resurfacing again through something as banal or grounded, but so sacred also as the bathroom issue in the United States last year. What do we do? Because it's going to confuse the linear brain. The linear brain, the idea of you cannot hold two opposing views at the same time. Yes, you can if you're hyperdimensional. That's bullshit. That's linear garbage, that you can't hold two opposite dilemmas or two different things. Sure you can. Source does all the time. These are just points of viewing. There's more than two. There's not just, divide and conquer duality polarity. There's not just Republicrats or demon publicans. Right? There's a lot more to the thing here. This is election day here in the U.S., But so I wanted to say I've had a direct experience of cyclical history and not linear, and I wanted to share it. Direct experience of this where Mother Earth showed me this. September 10th, 2001, Joy and I fly to Hawaii. September 10th, 2001. And we end up on the easternmost point of Big Island of Hawaii in Kapoho. This is where the sun first hits the Hawaiian Islands. It's the easternmost point of the Big Island. So it would be like Hawaii, Maui, Oahu, Kauai, like it arcs because of the volcanic, that's how it's created over there, because there's a volcanic eruption off the shore even of the Big Island now. creates new islands all the time. Well, anyway, we arrived there on the easternmost point. The next morning, because of jet lag or whatever, I get up at like 5. George's not awake. I grab a plastic, beach chair, and I walk out on the reef or on the rocks. It wasn't living reef. About 50 yards offshore, I'm sitting in a foot of water. And the sun hasn't come up over the horizon yet. Now, this is September 10th, the day, and the next morning it's September 11th. I'm not turned on any media yet. I go out, there's a little lava pool in the backyard. They do make natural lava pools. I surprise a speckled little moray eel like a baby. He's out of the water. He's up on the side eating something. I surprise a bunch of animals. They're like, oh, no, human, because the house probably sits empty half the time because it's, the vacation rental. And it's something beautiful about it. I'm kind of in interdimensional space. I sit and watch the sun come up. I do solar gazing, which I recommend you can do if you ease into it gently. It's an ancient solar gazing technique, yogic, Vedic technique, awakening solar technique. And you say, hello, Ra, thank you, Ra, Egypt, and from the further teachings of Atlantis before that. I sit and watch the sun come up, and I do the direct solar gazing, and my whole body just melts. I have this fire, like, really strong, heating up in my solar plexus, like my whole body heats up. And Mother Earth talks to me. She says, all that you saw, Tobias, the eel, the little fishes, the jumping fishes, the crabs scurrying away, all that. And then she told me a message, September 11th. I haven't seen yet anything that's happened. I've just gotten up. I'm watching the sunrise. She says, those that want to take me down, she says, there are forces that want to destroy Earth, drain Earth, and just leave her as a cinder. And they want to suck her aura out of her and eat her. There's galactic fucking planetary sucking. There's beings that drain energies off of whole solar systems. This exists. Watch Jupiter ascending. It's a good representation of how you harvest a whole planet. The Church of the Harvester. We're going to harvest all the souls, folks, because we like sucking your soul energy. Now, send your money. I'm joking, but I'm not joking, right? They actually will just call it the Church of the Soul Harvester. That's what they're here to fucking do, right? So I'm sitting there, and Mother Earth says, there are those that want to take me down. And she said, all this beauty you see. I'm sitting in the Hawaiian Islands. Hello, there's fish, there's octopus, there's a moray eel I surprised, there's birds, there's just lovely, it's paradise. Hello, Tahiti, Hawaii, right? She says, all this beauty you see, I can recreate almost overnight. It does not happen the way you've been indoctrinated, that it has to take millions of years to recreate these scenarios. It's not true. Those who are trying to take me down will not do so, because I've decided to not do that. So she was actually showing me that one of the main points there was, first of all, I'm not going to be killed like happens to other planets, because she has choice. Some planets choose, no, I don't want to do this anymore. You're sure, I'll die off and go do something else. But she's chosen to be here. The other thing she really impressed there was it can be recreated. Even if, she said this, even if there's nuclear war, I can recreate it very quickly. It is not linearly slow as you've been told. I go, well, that's cool messages. Then I walk back inside and I watch these fucking planes fly into the towers over and over again. And first I actually heard it on the radio. There's these two shock jocks in Hilo, and I thought, this is some kind of goof. What are they doing? It was really weird. But she knew I was going to see the portend of this sort of Kabbalish thing trying to take down the planet to foment war. And she said, look, she gave me the antidote 20 minutes before out on the reef. First of all, she fired up my heart and my solar plexus so I could feel it and actually participate in it. But the main impression was, I am so much bigger. The real trump card here is Mother Earth and Father Son. Thank you, St. Francis. So I remember, and the imprinting I got was, there's no linear. This linear slow thing is not real. You can insert a whole civilization like the Mayan civilization, seemingly from nowhere. You ever notice that? The Egyptian civilization seemed to come from seemingly nowhere, and it started already at the height, and it just fell after that. Same with the Mayans. Same with other civilizations. They were inserted at the peak of their peak. How does that work? There's no fucking evolution. There's no civilizationary evolution. The Assyrian temple in Egypt is at 10,500 BC, according to the ground level measurements, even by regular geologists. It has some kind of burnished, imprinted flower of life on some strange granite. That was the height of the Egyptian civilization. The rest is all fucking downhill. The shit at the end is Khufu. They're just power mongers. They're fucked up. They're just usurping. They're trying to usurp the glory. Mummification was invented much later. Why? Because they couldn't turn their bodies back into light. But they wanted to keep pretending they could. Oh, no, we can still do what the gods did. Trust us, folks. Keep feeding us your food and your energy and your kids. But we do the mummification because we don't want to scare you guys by doing the blaze of light thing. It's a bunch of horse shit. They couldn't do it anymore because they fell. But the point was the civilization of Egypt, actually Atlantean outpost, started at its height. Even regular Egyptologists will admit to that. Am I right or am I wrong?
Well, yeah, and here's the area with Egypt too. We think now, of course, that it was some 50 to 70,000 years that we could go back on the Giza Plateau. That totally. When we look at the Pharaonic dynasty, we have to throw out everything we know because there's, more than 5 different kings lists, according to Stephen Mailer.
The Sphinx is 100,000 years old, folks. Paul Brunton spends the night inside the pyramid, and he goes back 100,000 years travel and sees them building the Sphinx.
And you know what else is very interesting about the Sphinx is that not only was the head changed to be like Sekhmet, however, we also know that there was some very interesting predictions made over by Edgar Cayce. Edgar Cayce's work on Atlantis and his channeling, he had talked about there being a discovery of the Atlantean records under the paw of the Sphinx. And we know that there's been other chambers discovered now. But I want to touch down when we look over at what anthropologists say about these ancient civilizations, because there's a lot of infighting. Nobody getting along on these various theories, as you mentioned. You brought up a very good point. You said that there's Schoch's work and the idea of the water erosion. Now, there's an idea that goes around in modern anthropology and archaeologists. They'll say that we all came from Africa. They have the out of Africa theory, and others, such as Robert Sepper, have covered these topics, and Sepper's controversially challenged these ideas, and he goes pretty deep. In Sepper's work, he's got loads of videos online. He does a lot of incredible work in this area. He's examined a lot of these ancient peoples that we learn about the time of, from Homo erectus, when we're crawling around, till we learn about Denisovans and Neanderthals, Cro-Magnon, moving up over into Homo sapien sapien. But there are also people that we learn about that are just like J.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, which there's a lot more truth to that story than you even know. Believe me. We learn about a hobbit species that was wiped out by these birds that were attacking them.
They found a skeleton of that on Java or something a few years ago, right?
Oh, absolutely. And we know that a lot of these ancient rulers, these progenitors that were here, had these elongated skulls. That's why a lot of the tribes were trying to mimic it and trying to bind themselves up.
You know what? Where we do ayahuasca in Peru in the Sacred Valley, the Apus is the name for the gods of the mountains. There's one of them, Johnny, that everyone, even with their bare naked eye and just normal people look at that and go, oh my God, you can see the eyes, the nose, and the mouth, and he is shaped in a perfect cone head.
And that's it?
These were real, you can see, it's obvious. I mean, from our retreat center, you just look up on the Apus, the third layer of the mountains, not up to the glaciers, but the one right below it. Everyone can see it. You say, oh my God, there's a cone head guy. And these are real beings that you can tap into. What's his name? Brian Forster, I think, is like, the skulls and all that. Yeah.
He does great work. He's been up to Machu Picchu, all those areas, Bolivia, mapping these out. He's amazing.
Yeah, good stuff. But it's many insertions of civilizations. This is why the linear thing has got to go. The linear thing is a total trap. You are a Luddite and a two-dimensional being if you're stuck in the linear world. It's not how it works. You literally, when you go to the other side from this 3D, you realize you actually can see, if I head in this direction, I can reinsert myself into 50,000 BC. Or if I go in this direction physically, it's literally physical movement in a sense that moves you through time. We've forgotten that we can move in time. So it's all happening at once. It's spinning circles, and it's more than that. Imagine a solar ball that is operating in 3, 4, 5, 6D, and where you place yourself and intend yourself, you actually move in time. And this is how the lower techs, the ET techs in the fourth dimension, even the Greys, who are very unevolved species, let's be honest, they can still move in 4D space-time. This is something we're all going to be remembering. This is part of the reawakening on Earth. I've had masters start talking to me about it, saying, Tobias, if you want to, at this time, this is the time when all that's becoming true again, where we're going to learn. I had a client years ago who told me she was trying to explain this to me, how she got stuck in a time loop for thousands of years, but she was consciously aware of it. It just took 45 minutes here on Earth.
That's amazing. And when it comes to remembering and tapping into our DNA, where a lot of this storage, a lot of these memories are stored, we know we can store incredible amounts of information just on even a little droplet of DNA. We have these lost records within us. But what I also wanted to bring up, when we look at the histories from Herodotus and we see all of these ancient records and try to scour them and say, who built the pyramids? Even in Herodotus' time, we go back to Alexander the Great. In those areas, they didn't know who built the pyramids. The Egyptians found the pyramids. The people there 5,000 years ago found the pyramids, just like the Druids had found Stonehenge. In fact, it's very interesting. Manly P. Hall brings up in the Arabian Nights, when we look at the story of the great Sultan, Al-Rashad. Have you ever heard the story? And of course, there's great stories out of here in the Arabian Nights, later on, Aladdin and Sinbad and the 40 Thieves. But essentially, in case you've never heard the story, the concept is that we have a great sultan, a king, who finds out that his wife isn't loyal to him, so he has her killed off, and then every night, just kind of like a brutal version of King Henry VIII, every night he gets a new virgin wife and kills her by the morning. So eventually he gets a new young wife that someone allows him to marry reluctantly, and she tells him these stories. He gets these stories relayed over to him. He gets the stories relayed over to him every night to kind of keep this killing from happening for 1,001 nights. But in these stories, we hear about this idea of the Great Pyramid, and that they were built by giants. And Manly P. Hall talked about these giants being called the El Shaddai. And this great sultan had ordered the pyramids to be opened, which I think is very interesting. You know what
they are? They are shadow beings, jinn, in between. You can see them as elemental energies or personified. I just got it right now. Well, so you can view it from they were built by giants, or they were built by elemental energies. I would suggest and posit that Solomon did the same thing as he was trapping entities or using them with his mandalas, in a sense, his necromancy, let's be honest, right? But so it can be done through, quote, science, it can be sound light technology, or you can have it actually take shape as entities, as El Shaddai, a race of beings that are helping build it. Both are true. See if you can feel that, folks.
I definitely agree with you that we're talking about another type of physics, a cymatics sound technology that was used to manipulate and build these things. And there's some incredible, fascinating concepts. And before we get into some other records of who these beings are, you mentioned Jupiter Ascending. A new movie out that I recommend everybody go see is the new Doctor Strange movie, because it literally talks about dark energy tapping into these forces, ancient mystery schools, and those from other worlds in the multiverse trying to harvest the energies up of this world and abusing natural laws. Incredible stuff in there. With this book, when we look over at the story of Atlantis, and of course these are two different dialogues here we see with Critias. Of course, it's a different area, but it also talks about Atlantis. We learn in the Timaeus that our universe, or the cosmos, are shaped like a dodecahedron. Wow. And now we have that.
Wait. Now Plato's writing this, or who's writing this?
And well, essentially, we have
Solon is writing the Critias.
Well, no, we have a dialogue later from when we're talking about Critias, so we're coming back from Solon. But essentially, what we're getting here from Plato, and what we're talking about with Euclid's geometry, we're talking about some incredible principles and concepts here. One of the concepts is that our universe is in the shape of a dodecahedron, which is really incredible, because now in science, thanks to the Wilkinson's microwave anisotropy probe, or the WMAP scan, we know our universe is in the shape of a dodecahedron. We have this story of Atlantis coming out that is very fascinating, because it is embellished a little bit to tell the story of humanity, but Plato takes this story very seriously. We have this story that there was something very real that happened there. There was an ancient civilization that was upon the earth. And when we look at this, we got to see that this wasn't just a single place in the middle of the Atlantic. And there's a lot of clues to show us that there was something there. Beyond the Pillars of Hercules or the Rock of Gibraltar, maybe by the Azores Island, over by Portugal, which is very interesting with the Basque people, as Robert Sepper has looked into, is that they have a language that linguists can't decipher anywhere in the world. They have this RHO negative blood type. They have these very fair features that are very interesting. And guys like Ignatius of Loyola that were brought over for the Jesuits, or the Society of Jesus, were said to have there be a Basque descendant. So there's something very interesting about what we see in the middle of the Atlantic. But what we have to see with with the Atlantis mysteries, is this was a great distribution of great maritime culture. And this went all over the world. It was kind of like the British Empire, it was everywhere you looked in the world. But
they were not ships. They were underwater submarine ships, Tesla energy, like I said, and floating ships. Imagine dirigibles. Imagine radio frequency, like you turn into a radio on your radio dial, except it carries energy. So these ships were basically RF decoded crystal energies, and the obelisks were actual antennas that can maintain the grid around the planet, or that part of the planet that Atlantis had conquered, subjugated, led, created. America is the most center of this now, although there's other parts of Europe and Japan and so forth. But this whole thing we're recreating now. We're recreating the dominance. I have a story to tell about what made the final fall of Atlantis that I've received directly. We're paralleling that with the U.S. But anyway, go ahead.
No, I'm glad that you're going to bring that up, because essentially America is a big part of this story, of course. Yeah. And when Manly P. Hall wrote in his Atlantis and Interpretation booklet, as well as he wrote in The Secret Teachings of All Ages about Atlantis, we also get in Plato's account itself, we learn that Atlantis was corrupted. There was this demon king, or this other type of serpent ruler. There were the good serpent class, and then there were the negative class. And there was a ruler that ruled invisibly from the air, Tetvahat, and this ruler that came about started to corrupt people. And these people knew that something was going to happen to Atlantis. So they started to prepare because, again, we can link this probably back to the Younger Dryas cataclysm some 12,000 years ago, essentially just like around 200 million years ago during the Triassic period when the dinosaurs were mostly wiped out by the asteroid that would have hit over probably by Mexico, by the way, by that big crystal cave that you hear about online. That's probably why there's so much weird energy in Mexico, by the way. But when you see what happened, these people knew something was happening. There was a corruption over by what was happening. And Plato relates this to the gods with Poseidon and everything else. So essentially, they started to split out, go all over the world. And we know they started to take off. But in this story of what started happening, we learn about these sort of missionaries that they had. And we have records of these missionaries all throughout the world. And they went into even places that are no longer there by you mentioned Tahiti and the French Polynesian islands. We learn about Mu over by Hawaii, over by Sri Lanka, the Great Land Bridge. We learn about Lemuria. We learn about places that have sunken into the ocean that are no longer there, over by Japan and by Cuba. I mean, Graham Hancock writes about this underwater world stuff. But when you look over even into ancient Mesopotamia, ancient Babylonia, they have in their stories a story about a guy that shows up on their shores. And they're a very primitive people, by the way. You can go back into the British Museum, check the cuneiform writing, look at the histories, and you'll see that these people had these visitors that helped them. Because, again, they had these straw roofs. They couldn't even make a fire. They were throwing rocks at each other. They were looking to still develop agriculture. And they had this visitor named Dagon or Nimrod or Oannes. Some later called him Sidon, which translates over for helping them with agriculture. And he had this fish hat on with these scales on his body. He also had the Templar cross. And essentially when you see the Pope's wearing his hat, the mitre. And that's why the Catholic Church...
and the hat sometimes was a fish mouth, right? Isn't it?
Yeah.
The hat itself.
Yes, right? Absolutely. And so, I mean, that's why, again, we could go on for a very long time how the Vatican's built on Vaticanus, how it's Simon the Magus from Babylon buried underneath in their catacombs, not St. Peter.
That's a whole other show.
That's a totally other show. But if we go over even into the story of Mesoamerica, the Aztec, the Mayans, we learn about Quetzalcoatl, Culhuacan, Zoltan, who essentially was this plumed serpent and probably had these serpent-like ships that arrived on their shores. And by the way, there's pyramids on both sides of the Atlantic, and that's where we get the first written language in the Western Hemisphere. We have this great culture pop up, and these guys all had their bags, by the way, in the pictures. Many of you have probably seen this illustrated online or read articles about it. They all had these bags, most likely holding the keys to agriculture and whatnot. These were great missionaries. They came to these people, and they said, okay, I'm going to seed a culture for you. I'm going to teach you how to build up a society. I'm going to give you a written language. I'm going to teach you about laws. I mean, these people were cannibals before he essentially came along. And so he taught them this great culture, and then he left. And on both cases, they said, I'm going to come back one day, and I want you to keep my rules and keep my laws. And one day when I come back, you'll know it's me. And we have clues of what Quetzalcoatl could have looked like, especially when we look over at Teotihuacan and Chichen Itza in Mexico. By the way, there's similarities there over to Newgrange in Ireland, because we know there's a solstice light up alignment there as well, as we see in many places around the world. But essentially, when we see this particular story, we can go into the Codex over in Madrid in Spain, and we learn about when Cortez and the Spanish explorers came there, the natives basically bowed to him. The Aboriginal peoples at that time bowed to him and said, you've returned. Here's your belongings that you left behind. Let me give them to you. There was no struggle. They were like wowed by these people. And so I think it's absolutely amazing that we have these clues. Now you also see the clues to the light, all these ancient crosses long before Christianity. And as I was saying to you, a great show would be sometime that we should cover is not necessarily trying to debunk religions or say, okay, to people, I'm going to debate you on Jesus, because we have other records in the Gnostic scriptures of the Nag Hammadi, which are different than we get this different idea that comes out from Mithras and Dionysus that's been brought into the winter solstice Christmas idea, which is also a beautiful story, which has been applied here, that the cross is part of this. We know that this ancient cross that they have, that even can be traced back to the swastika, to the cycles of light. It can be traced back into the Tau, the most ancient of all crosses. From this cross, representing the cycles of the sun, representing the cycles of the light, like the Celtic cross. This is the shape that a quantum hologram of a photon makes when the beams are crossed. And this is amazing that these ancient people held these principles and passed it down and trickled it down into the mystery schools, trickled it down into the religions. And really quickly for you, when you look at the secret societies around the world, look at the colors that they use very carefully. You'll have a red school, a blue school, a green school, and you in a yellow school, and you'll say, where did those colors come from? Those are the prismatic split-ups of the secret hidden rays of the light that come, the various rays of the light that are split up into the mystery schools around the earth. And these centers, just like the chakras of the planet, have been our great protectors, and our progenitors, our ancient builders, that have held on to these great secrets and mysteries of the light. And to those who have the pleasure of seeking the mysteries, great things are unlocked.
Yes. So feel how these ambassadors, progenitors, and there's different layers to that, they would bring this in their secret magic bag of tricks, which turned into the doctor's little black bag 100 years ago. But it's pretty similar, except imagine galactic ambassadors or societal civilizational ambassadors on our planet. And so whether it's the dogs, the flower of life under his paw, or the flower of life imprinted in these techniques and tools, where would they learn the Tau cross or that Maltese cross? From the amplituhedron, the photonic, the shapes, the sacred geometry, because it was shared with them. Now, they may have said, this is a holy symbol and we'll stick it on our chest or make an amulet out of it, but it was given to them by the master gods. And so, yes, they tended to worship it, but it is how you activate a civilization. And it takes whatever it takes for it to germinate and come to fruition. Now is the time it's coming to fruition. The picture you just showed, hold it up again, right? That's the Maltese cross, right?
I'm trying to find it. I put it somewhere. It fell off the desk. I think it's fallen behind my desk. Found it. We got it.
That's an actual picture of a photon's shape. Now, there's more geometry to it than there is, but basically it carries the sacred geometry within it. So how do they know this? How do we arrive at these symbols? Because they were given to them, whether it was in the highlands of Tibet or the civilizations ahead of that. As Johnny's sharing this stuff, just allow yourself to feel there were ancient civilizations. You held up a book a while ago called Gods with Amnesia. Gods with Amnesia, you said, by the guy who doesn't fully subscribe to the African theory that we all came out of there, yeah. That's an awesome title. Just feel that. Many of you listening to this, you are gods with amnesia. Not everyone is on Earth. Not everyone has been a god that has fallen into amnesia. There's many spirits on Earth that are rising up from being elementals and animal and nature spirits on Earth into a human and then star person. But there are star beings that came to Earth that fell with amnesia. So this is something to remember. We've had many high civilizations, like they say to Solon. Solon, you think you're the highest in all of it. You guys are the remnant, the tail. Just like I like to say to people, Egypt was just an outpost that happened not to get destroyed during the cataclysm. It's a Mad Max civilization. You with me? You know what I'm saying? The later Egypt. But Casey is about the cleanest thing I've found on Atlantis. I reverberate if anyone's interested. Edgar Casey's, through his various readings, the stuff on Atlantis, if you want to know. I've had personal stuff in Atlantis. I've had 2 or 3 lifetimes where I've been... You're not meant to go so look at past lives, usually it's not that effective. You can do it how you want, but most of us who really want to wake, you do it as it's needed. My first past life vision I ever had was of a lifetime in Atlantis. And I'm just describe it because, and it's really funny we're doing this because the person I was just talking to last night, we were going to talk about how we knew each other in Atlantis. It's like all the usual synchronicity. But my first remembrance was I was a eagle-headed person. I could go between human face and having an eagle's head. I could transform still into I could actually fly, an eagle person, just like the Native Americans do shape-shifting. And I was living outside the city. There was some kind of marker boundary or wall, a kind of a walled city. And I used to sneak into town, basically, in my eagle form, but I didn't want to fully join being part of the civilization, so I was still a free being outside it. And part of it, I used to go visit this woman that we were in love, and her father didn't approve of this. I'm not one of the sanctioned part of the civilization of Atlantis at that time. But seeing these things vividly, this is why in Egypt you still have the different, gods that are half human and half animal, because that went on Earth as well, which is a whole another story that we did get ourselves in trouble with that on Pangea in the Garden of Eden. We started mixing sexual energies that really got us trapped in bodies, satyrs and all that. But many of us have done that. You were mermaids, you were all mermen, you were eagle people. This is why the remnants are still there with the dancers in Hopi Land, with the eagle dancers and all this stuff. Because we are a melting pot. Atlantis, so that was one of my first lifetimes where I actually sat and watched my lifetime. Usually you want to know why you died and what the trauma was and you want to heal it. That's usually why that happens. Atlantis went on for a long time. My thought was it's about 250,000 years that civilization went on. And it had 3 major breakups. And it was also, like Johnny's saying, there's other it was spread out. We were trying to conquer. Atlantis was trying to, quote, civilize the world. Kind of like America thinks she needs to civilize other people. And you should be democratic like we are. It's the exact same history repeating itself. With this time we may have a better shot at not actually creating the cataclysm. But the final cataclysm, as I understand it, with Atlantis, was after we'd been warned, like you were saying, there were warnings that would go out that said, like the Basques and the Tuareg in Africa, and the Yucatan and the Altiplano in Peru. These were people, and Giza, Ra-Ta, the high priest that Edgar Casey talks about that left. They were fleeing Atlantis. They were saying, basically like Noah. Noah was told that story, But so they were being told in several iterations, 50,000 BC and then 5,000 BC, and then finally at the 10,500 BC was the final sinking, and at the end, many of the, quote, people that were still interested in respectful living and so forth were warned, this is going down, the ship's going down, and they fled Atlantis and started other cultures. That was also at the end, mostly, They fled the sinking continents. Many of us have memories of being trapped in the tunnels in Atlantis and dying there. There were underground tunnels that led to the ocean where the ships would be parked inland and underland, if you could feel that, okay? And there's many archetypal remembrance in many people that were alive and incarnated there that they drowned in that cataclysm. So sometimes in some wood carving, or what do you call it, Albrecht Dürer, that stuff he did, the wood prints of the tiger and the mother with her baby at the final thing. My grandmother's Bible used to have that beautiful picture, of the last mountaintop before the waters totally covered the earth, and there's a mother tiger and a mother human and some other people trying desperately to survive. Why? Because it's an archetypal memory. It's a collective memory. What went on when this beautiful civilization, as they say, Solon, you're just remembering a little bit of it. There was much higher civilizations. Imagine free energy. Imagine Greek living as Greek gods. That was basically life in Atlantis. Open door policy, perfect spring year round, diaphanous, barely clothed with energies and or clothing. You'd have ultimate 3D television that was sort of like what we're heading back towards. We're just rediscovering stuff. It was Obi-Wan Kenobi or our only hope, holograms. That's what our TV's going to next. We had that technology in Atlantis. Johnny Carson was incarnate then and did a show for Atlantis. He recreated it here in America. These are just repeating things. So we had a much higher tech, but there was also a decadence there. Porn invented the internet. There was a suppression here, right? Well, in Atlantis, we misused sex. We had slaves. The Manitors, these beings that got trapped in half animal, half human bodies. There was a super class system. And some of us used these beings as slaves. It's just like people fucking their slaves, you know, the white plantation owners. Or in the slavery in the Ottoman, like you just described the story. That went on big time in Atlantis. And anytime you use the creative force in a non-respecting way, you set up certain vibrational fields that then will have repercussions. If you can integrate them, you're fine. If you don't, eventually it will show up as cataclysms. It's just how it works. It's just as actual spiritual, sexual physics. Yeah.
Well, as they started to deteriorate, as you mentioned, you know, that society was already falling apart. There was that evil force that was ruling them with Tetvahat. And as you mentioned, they started to fall into this depravity, and there was a destruction of their civilization.
And at the end, literally this suppressed stuff, and this is where we're at now as collective humans. We're doing the exact same thing now. We're suppressing it with drugs. Now, there was an ET influence from Mars as well that came in with high-tech stuff to Atlantis as well. It was a nexus. Once you evolve to a certain point, you start crossing into Stargate portals and time travel. And there you get both. It's meeting the devil at the crossroads. Hello? You meet both the good choice, just like Eisenhower meeting with the good ETs, the angelics, and the fucking grace. Who do you choose to go with, right? Same thing we did in Atlantis. My father was one of those pre-scientists. And we said, well, there's some high boom tech, fine, shiny objects that we can, quote, help the world with. Can you say harp? Harp, right? We can help the world to keep it safe and make sure everyone becomes like us. We did the exact same thing in Atlantis. We thought we were helping other civilizations, which we did with those magic tools and the magic amplituhedrons and the learning about true spiritual physics magic. We did it. But at the end, it became controlling. We wanted to control. The final countdown. I'm joking. Swedish band Europe, right? But that's why that hits us. One hit wonder. The final countdown. Why? Because we're all like, fuck, it's coming again. We can feel it. What that was when we had these super fine weapons. You can use them for free energy like Tesla did, but Tesla also knew he could create earthquakes with it. And he demonstrated that a few times. He said, I'm going to do a little earthquake just by this sort of pulsar weapon, right? And he did, created earthquakes in New Jersey from Manhattan. He said, I'm going to show you I can do it. But he shut that off, it's his karma, right? He doesn't want to do that again. He wanted to bring good energy. It was like paying off. I wonder what the fuck Tesla did in Atlantis or on other planets. That would be interesting to do an Akashic reading on Tesla's soul, right? Very interesting. But so at the end, these powerful weapons, radionic, beyond sort of laser weapons, these are mixed with thought, photonic, sort of the stuff that went on in India, the Vimanas and the shot, what do they call them, the discs. These are spinning mantric weapons that are both infused with the person and the God energy of the personality, but it's also psychotronic bomb warfare mixed with sort of hyper lasers, ray guns. Right? That's what we had in Atlantis. At the end, we were trying to create, one happy planet, except we're being misused by these off forces that you have described one way. I've never heard that particular story about this evil sort of lord of the air, right? But these off-world entities, so China's not cooperating with Atlantis. Everyone else is pretty much on board. But China's like, fuck you guys, you're not going to tell us how to do it. Sound familiar? It's exactly where we're at now again. China is the big kahuna versus the U.S. Well, what we did at one point then, the final sinking comes when we finally high-string tune these supercritical photonic psychotronic bomb warfare stuff. We can't even talk about it because we can't imagine it in our current state. We can get little glimpses of it. We send one of these ray weapons through the earth. It's like what they do now with laser, or what do they call it? When they have cancer, they put their rays inside you and they dial up the dial and they send it right to your lungs as a nexus to burn down your cancer. Well, we did that on a global scale from Atlantean out. We put that together. We told the quote yellow people, I'm just using the colloquialism here, said you either submit or we're going to send this fucking weapon at you. Do you ever wonder why there's like melted fucking nuclear glass all under the Gobi Desert? Because they didn't cooperate. And we said, well, here you go. We're going to give you a little show of our force. Can you say Hiroshima and Nagasaki? We're repeating the exact same history. We wiped it out. We wiped out the Gobi Desert. Those super civilizations that were there before, it became a desert to this day because it was only 12,500 years ago, which is nothing. It's a fucking eye blink, 12,500 years compared to the real history of Earth. So that's what we did. And when we did that through Mother Earth, we radiated her with our shit. Can you say fracking on a huge scale or HARP? Imagine super HARP places being sent through the Earth. Mother Earth is going to go, get the fuck out of me. Quit doing that. And she said, that final weaponry we used from Atlantis to control the Gobi area, Mother Earth said, as George Carlin says, she shook herself and sank the final remnants of Atlantis.
Wow. And that's essentially what Plato is trying to teach us. He's trying to teach us about not only this place, Atlantis, and this time period in this civilization, but he's also teaching us a lesson. It's a life path, saying don't repeat this mistake through, learning it through the dialogue, what's taking place there from cool. Solon.
I've never read it, actually, but go ahead. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, we see other studies that have been taken of Atlantis. We know the Ignatius Donnelly, who looked at this subject very seriously, and where Atlantis would be geographically speaking. But when you talk about the pyramids also, and these ancient technologies, we also know that they were power plants, most likely, and the obelisks were free energy distribution systems. And if we go back again into the histories with Herodotus, he tells us about this place that existed to the north that, was the first civilization, which is why the Nazis were going, into the Arctic Circle, and they were looking for clues. I mean, we know that they were looking not only in the Indiana Jones movie that Spielberg shows us, where they're looking for the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie, they're looking for these relics and looking for Vimanas, and they're going by, looking for where the Aryan progenitors were.
Tula.
Over
in Hyperborea, right? That's where we're going with that, right? Hyperborea.
Yeah. Well, I just want to touch down on Hyperborea quickly, because Hyperborea, that would be like the proto or the early Atlanteans.
Before that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, because we see a civilization that would have been there that would have had these outposts, and we've had these deluges and destructions because of the asteroids that would have hit, especially 12,000 years ago. And we see two terms, Pleistocene or Holocene and the Pleistocene period, are before the Ice Age and before the Ice Age and after the Ice Age. So we see these different periods, just like when you mentioned Conan. And that's why certain secret societies and certain doctrines started coming out, even with Madame Blavatsky talking about these various ancient races on Earth.
I'm joking.
We hear about the Hyperboreans, the Atlanteans and whatnot, that these beings are these various versions of humanity that are there from the cyclic evolution, have their own sort of karma to work out in their DNA, that when people come into a certain karma, they work it out in their lifetime, and how this works in sort of a mystical destiny sort. But when this happened, this is what the Nazis believed also, that we hear about these groups going to in the Hollow Earth, into Agartha. We hear about these various societies, like the Thule, which looks like Thule Society, and pay close attention when you're driving your car around and you see people with car racks that say the Thule, Thule, car rack, the Atlantis 5000 model, you'll know where this comes from.
I'm amazed at that. It's just so funny. It's in the collective.
Right in your face.
Yeah, when I first heard of Thule, now I'm from Sweden, it was something archetypal that exploded in my head when I first heard that sound, or the word Thule. It was in a book called The Greatest Miracle on Earth by Og Mandino. It's just a little thing he hinted at. There's little hints at it. Now, this gets really far out, folks, when we start talking about inner Earth. But this is previous Atlantis. It's so far out, but it is actually true that there are human beings like us that have lived for hundreds of thousands of years inside giant caverns that create a natural type of natural light that's mimicking sunlight. And there's a whole system of those inside the Earth. And yes, the Nazis, some of them got taken in there, and it went bad in one sense, and they're in the South Pole too. This sounds like fucking fantasy. I understand that. But it's actually true. And these Hyperboreans, it was, before the Atlantis. They've been there. Imagine living here as humans. Then these humans live several thousands of years. They live like 10,000 years, right? But they're not gods either. They have masqueraded as gods for us. The inner Earth beings, the Agarthians, and there's factions of them as well. There's 5 major factions of the Agarthians, and not all of them want. Some of them. This is a big reveal at this time of Earth. Where not only are we going to meet galactic family, we're going to meet our inner Earth family. We're going to have the whole. Johnny and I are hinting at some massive alternative history here, not the myopic, linear. Stuck on one. Imagine living on a line. It's like it's like 2-dimensional beings cannot imagine 3-dimensional beings. Well, 3-dimensional beings can't imagine 4-dimensional beings. So we're just in 3D. We're just starting to imagine now again. You see your shadow animals walking through your house. You're starting to feel energies in your body. You're either going to get scared shitless and take more pharmaceutical drugs and shut that off. Don't go to your psychiatrist is my recommendation. I'm seeing people and hearing voices. Not a good idea. Everyone I work with is in. I'm working with a woman, ancient Toltec master. I can see her past lives. Why? Because I've learned to do this over 20 years. I can feel into it. And she's like, Tobias, I just raised my kids. I didn't believe in any of this. And this is crazy. And she's like, well, now when I put my feet on the ground, I can actually feel it vibrating. I'm actually hearing music from the heavens. It's like music that doesn't exist on Earth. I'm hearing voices, and she's super grounded. Cool woman. So many, many of us are going to have this stuff start bleeding through now. It's going to, no more. The veil is thinning. And if you don't want to be freaked out, you need to get healed. You need to feel your inner energy body. You need to learn to accept that you're a god with amnesia. The gods are coming out of amnesia at this time on Earth. All things shall be revealed. The truer history of Earth is going to be revealed. There's much more to it. We're talking about Atlantis and Egypt and Hyperborea, this part. There's many other parts. The Aborigines of Australia have a whole fucking other timeline. It's a whole different universe for them.
Oh yeah, they have all sorts of knowledge that is known to them. But I want to add one more piece to this puzzle, and I can't leave this conversation today without talking about the great Sir Francis Bacon. Okay, so Sir Francis Bacon, who in all likelihood is probably the immortal Saint Germain.
I love you more than bacon.
I've seen that on people's bumper stickers.
There's a bacon revival, folks.
Yeah, you know all these people eating Baconators and everything. But
veganism, folks. Anyway,
that's exactly it. And so with Sir Francis Bacon, here we have a guy who's kind of like a Tesla, brilliant genius. And some of these guys, I'm not even sure if they're fully human, okay? I think that we could be looking at ancient progenitors that have lasted on this planet. And a whole other different conversation would be who the ancient bloodlines are on these planets, where we look at royalty. And, we could see how this is connected to the ancient Atlanteans.
And don't fall for that. All the royal bloodlines are some fucking evil reptilians that want to eat you. David Icke has done an unbelievable job waking people up to this stuff. But again, overreactionaries, you're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So there's both good and bad royal lineages. There's some people that are working really powerfully. And wasn't Bacon the son of Queen Elizabeth or something?
Well, actually, it's really funny now that you mentioned the royal families and everything like that. Really quickly, I was just over in England, and I was at, we visited Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and so many places. It was absolutely beautiful. But in the back at Windsor Castle, behind St. George's College, there's a very important clue that leads us to knowing more about the Atlantis story that ties into Bacon. Essentially, when we look back there behind St. George's College, we hear about the Order of the Garter. And many people have heard of the Order of the Garter, these knights, and they think that it has to do with a woman's garter belt, with King Edward III, and a woman's garter belt dropped, and he said, "Honi soit qui mal y pense." And this is their motto, shame on him who thinks evil of it. But it's actually... That's actually just a nonsense story that has to do with more like the colloquial name. It's actually the Order of the Garter, like guardianship. These are the ancient garters of the planet. And according to 17th century British historians, if you go into St. George's College, behind where the chapel, where the Queen attends every Sunday church service, according to the 17th century British historians, they say that according to the Black Book of Hermes, that the ancient kings, the antediluvian kings, the kings of antiquity that ruled the world, they had an ancient union of unity, and this is how their thrones were set up to rule the world. And that's why when you go there, you're getting an ancient clue, because all the flags of all the nations in the world are all there to show you this representation. In fact, Plutarch tells us, when we look at his writings, that all the ancient kings from Egypt are actually just antediluvian kings who were deified. And so we have this great mystery. But over with Sir Francis Bacon, amazing story, because this relates to America, and I gotta bring this up. He wrote this book called The New Atlantis. And this is essentially talking about America, the new world, that they were priming people for, this idea of this great new civilization that was going to be like Atlantis.
When did he write that?
Well, we got to see. There was one more story that connects to this for Sir Francis Bacon. Or Sir Francis Bacon is the true identity of William Shakespeare. There's no way that a Stratford man at the time of King James, some called him Queen James. There's no way that the Stratford man, who could barely even sign his name, had written these magnificent words with over 20,000 different words that are not commonly used. The man was a legal mind. You look at A Tempest, Othello, Romeo and Juliet. I mean, the magnificent works of Shakespeare. These were made to prepare people for the Atlantis civilization. It was to prep their mind that he had written these. And he was also the overseer, translator of the King James Bible. And so that's why you get little hidden mysteries in there, like the name Sol, Om, On, the three names for the light. You get the name like Lucifer from the Latin. You get little hidden Rosicrucian keys. This is the father of modern masonry that came along. You get this great mind that's there giving us so many secrets. And seeding civilizations for later on when we go forward into the great story of America. And there's a book somewhere in my book pile here, The Secret Destiny of America. As you say these
things, I get huge ahas and insights of things that I've never felt before.
Yes.
That's what's really cool. Like I wanted to say, we have an ancient battle between the kings, these ancient kings of Atlantis, right?
Yes.
That we could then say the people revolt against, fuck you, you control us. That's the popular theme now. But it was also, you can understand, anytime a people get free, that when they've been used to authority, it takes a while for them to claim self-authority and be able to run their own lives. It's just like raising teenagers. You kind of watch them the first time they get an apartment by themselves. You don't just go, okay, you're done, get out of here, because they'll drug themselves to death or some shit will go down, right? Well, the same with when you're trying to hand authority over. My recording today, if you see on Facebook, and I'll put it on YouTube as well, it's called Inner versus Outer Authority. So I'm suggesting a conciliation between the rulers and the ruled instead of this. There were people like Bacon and others that were theocratic leaders, if you will, meaning they're downloading higher intelligence for a reason. They're doing a job to increase the civilization. When you're trying to educate people that have been slaves, like the Hebrews for 300, whatever it was, they were caught in Egypt, Moses can't really share the giant secrets with them because they're illiterate peasants that have been slaves. So you need to have a benevolent upgrade. It needs to happen. And if you reach too soon for it, it's like we say, oh, let's give democracy to Uganda, and then Idi Amin ends up just, doing massacring his own people. You know what I'm saying? Or you need to allow self-power to come back. This is why, yes, the ideal of democracy and everybody's awake, that's a beautiful ideal. But it's just a fucking, the road to hell is paved with nice ideals. It needs to land on the ground and be functional. The slaves in America, when they were freed, at first they were like scared. It's like opening the cage. Some were ready, obviously. Some were, but what we're used to, we need loving upgrading, loving education. And so being pitted against each other, like rip the kings, from the thrones and hang them upside down and skewer them. Yes. It went bad in some places, but remember, there were people that were good, like the Sir Francis Bacon. He's doing Shakespeare. He's putting in those beautiful morality and educational and wisdom plays so that we will be fucking ready when we get our freedom in America.
That's right. And we can't leave this story without talking about what happened at the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Of course, we know the original Illuminati, when it was founded, May 1st, 1776, May Day, which is why we say it. Then we had the American Revolution, then going on to the signing of the Declaration of the Independence with the great independence with the great geniuses that were there. We're talking about your Benjamin Franklins, your Thomas Jeffersons. Most, by the way, were Masons, except for John Adams. But when we see this signing, they were all afraid of the redcoats.
Was he, a fucking Methodist? No, I'm kidding.
they were all afraid of being hung. They were all afraid of the redcoats. But a mysterious visitor came from behind closed doors. And as you pointed out before, some will say it was Saint Germain. Others will say Sir Francis Bacon and Saint Germain were the same person, if you look this up in the records. And he said to them, do not be afraid for your lives. Your lives, sorry, not your lives. This is not a Nintendo game. Do not be afraid for your lives.
Well, sort of.
Just sign the friggin' thing. No, he said to them, God meant for America to be free. And they signed it, and this mysterious man gave them, the confidence to be able to sign this thing. And the rest is history. And all those terms, by the way, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, those are Masonic terms, also inspired by the Renaissance period. But great and amazing things happen. That's why there is a destiny for America.
And I want to inject an insert here. Thank you so much, Johnny. Lest you think Johnny and I are apologists and secret fucking Masons.
I'm not a Mason, but I know lots of Masons.
You do, because you do unbelievable research into these things.
Well, thank you. So do you.
You do. And which is really cool for me. Every time I hear you talk, I get the grok downloads. I got a bunch of them tonight, like insights into other levels of Hyperborea and this, that, and the other. But we are not saying that. We're not saying, yes, we should totally go that way. No, is there some nasty control shenanigans with Illuminati and secret rituals gone bad? Like I've said before, I've had direct experience with Saint Germain myself, where I got it from him. Because there's something in me that reads people's records. I read the record with ayahuasca. I'm not being prideful here. It just seems to something that occurs. So Saint Germain did not send this to me. He showed up in my room one time because I had a teacher that told me about Saint Germain, which I'd never heard before. And I've had insights about it, but I could see how he started the Illuminati, the Bavarian Illuminati. And he also said, and I'm here to clean it up, because I was a little hopeful. Anytime you give extra power, it's like Mickey's Sorcerer's Apprentice in Fantasia. Some of the apprentices fuck it up, right? Mm-hmm. So the more power, even the Egyptian masters, Ra themselves, the gods from Venus, now we're going really deep with this, that ascended into a Christos 2.3 billion, with a B, years ago, the planet Venus, the collective beings on Venus turned into a collective Christ, a mandala, a unified Christ consciousness, and they've been here ever since. An injection that they did was the pyramid, by the way. They taught the Atlanteans that stuff. They created the pyramid, the initiation chamber part of it, the power plant and different things. But they did their ascension. Check this out, folks. I'm on this plan lately, although I've been a warrior and all kinds of stuff in other lives. Through what? Through sexual union. Instead of meditating alone in a cave for 40 years, like, St. Anthony or whatever, or raising your kundalini, no, they did it through activating sexual love, true tantra. Not some bullshit weekend tantra where you're like just trying to get laid. That's bullshit. You'll just reap sexual diseases. Get off it. But if you do it, that's fine. That's how we learn. We learn through our mistakes. But the Venusians, that's why we still collectively remember the Venusians as the planet of love. Duh. Right? Because they ascended through that. Now what could be better? Awakening through fucking and sex and love and transpersonal love and no jealousy, and you emerge as a Christ consciousness while retaining your individuality. I'm like, I'm in! So they thought in their innocence, this is gods are still learning. Just because you're even an ascended Christ, you're not the God of the universe. I'm going to say it again. Just because you're an ascended Christ, you're not yet merged as the God of the universe. You're still on probation. You're still learning. You're light years ahead of most humans. So these ascended Christos things, a bunch of them from Ra, that's what they call themselves. They're a collective complex called the Ra. Listen to Corey Good. When he talks to those guys, they just say, I'm Ra so-and-so, I'm Ra TL. Imagine saying, I'm Christ Johnny, I'm Christ Tobias, I'm Christ Linda.
It would be appropriate because Christ is just the title. It means
that's
to be
right.
Anointed by oil.
So from Venus, they just do Ra. They say Ra because it's a ray from the sun. They merge with the sun through sexual union and all that. They all merge together into one, which we all say in the New Age. Hey, we're all one. Well, then let's fucking do it. Let's try it. Instead of going, it's true, we're all one. Yeah, that's the same. The garbage in the basement, but no one's hauling it out. Theory is theory. Practical landed reality is different. So they ascended through initiation chambers that made them face their shit. That's why when Napoleon in his arrogance thought, I'm going to spend the night in the inside chamber, he got so fucking terrified, probably shit himself, pissed himself.
Isn't that a body experience?
Yeah. And he got so scared because it surfaces, all that focused energy in the pyramid will surface your shit. An ayahuasca ceremony will do it. Prayer for 6 hours will do it. Meditation for a while will do it. Any real experience will give you a focused experience. Well, the initiation chamber of the pyramid is a focused experience. That the king's chamber is never any fucking kings or queens. That's not it. The initiation chamber is at the exact point, whatever measured inside that center pyramid, and the shafts going to the different stars, Draco or Ursa Major, I forget where they go. These are actual travel shafts, so you can go see when your soul leaves your body in that initiation sarcophagus made of a certain granite. Granite has a very special property. You travel through that shaft and go, holy shit, the Dracos are part of the deal. Holy shit, these guys are part of the deal. There's a whole bunch of star families. Oh, I'm not just a human. I'm remembering myself as a galactic soul. But you can't do that unless you're clean. And clean of ego, clean of your shit, clean of your stuff. Napoleon didn't survive. He basically had to get the hell out of there. And when he did get out of there, he said, I'll never go doing that again. Because he couldn't face the shadow. So you have to face the shadow for this ascension. But the Ra people 2.3 billion years ago, they became a Christ, a planetary Christ, while retaining individuality. You can have it both ways. Have your cake and eat it too. Some of the deep lies that go on in your head, oh, if I become all spiritual, I won't be able to fuck anymore. Biggest bunch of horse shit in the world. Or I won't be able to have any fun anymore. I won't be able to eat what I want. Not at all. You think that fat, happy Buddha I got to see here somewhere, you don't think he's having a good time?
Maitreya?
Yeah, he's having a good time. These guys are, here's a Ganesha. What's he doing? He's drinking the elixir of life. This part of his trunk's, let me see if I can get it right here. His trunk is in this cup. What's he doing over here? He's enjoying fucking manna permanently. He's just sucking that stuff up. I got a fat belly. I'm having a good time. There's no losing pleasure in real spirituality. It is upping the pleasure magnanimously. But even the gods of Ra thought that, look at these humans, they're really struggling. How about we introduce this amazing monument, which they also did in Atlantis, and we'll help them accelerate their evolution through this super focused energy, spiritual energy, and physical energy, and star energy, and it's a power plant, and I agree with all that. And the halls of Amenti underground, etc. And they thought, oh, hey, they love fucking. Why don't we show them how we did it? They can ascend and become gods through enjoying sexual union and love and heart and opening the chakras and absolute melting. Agape love mixed with the most fucking outrageous orgasms you ever had. Would you trade your $1 billion for that? Yes, you would. Right? So the Ra people said, let's help the humans with that. But the Ra people, the Venusians, are all, I know this is really far out, but this is deep stuff we're revealing, Johnny and I do. They fucked up. They know now that that pyramid was introduced too early. In other words, the pyramid is a failure. It fell into disrepute and the misuse of black magicians. Now you could say on one end that's ultimately it's all just experimentation. But they had a lesson to learn. The humans weren't ready. We weren't ready to release war or psychic warfare or competition. We weren't quite ready. So the pyramid is off base. Doesn't function. It's not off base. It's not functioning. It's a shutdown. The capstone's gone. It's stripped. It's like a car that's been stripped in the ghetto. Currently, the pyramid. It needs to be reactivated. It might be. Anyway, my point here is, even gods are learning. Now I'm going to say something that I could get crucified for. Jesus is not a complete God yet. Neither am I, obviously. But I'm saying even these people you deify, that's not helpful. Don't deify Jesus. Let him be elder brother. Let him show you. Yeah, he can walk on water. He's got, so do the magicians, so do, Solomon, so does the yogis and so forth. He wants you to wake up. But my point there was, even these super advanced beings that built the pyramid, they were learning that. Reading the Law of One, they fucked up. That was a fuck up. Or not a quite, why is God so perfect, or source? He lets us completely destroy civilizations like Atlantis. That's a learning experiment. Don't tune the fucking weaponry too high, you'll blow up in your face.
But here's the thing. It's happening in cycles. We know that the Scarlet Council came in there and corrupted the earlier Egyptian priesthood, and there you go.
Ayahuasca, by the way. She traveled home from Peru with me.
That's amazing. Yeah. And we also see that when we look over at Akhenaten and what had happened with Tutankhamun, again,
it's a sad story.
With Akhenaten, yeah, he turned everyone away from the priestcraft that was there and the theocracy that had taken over Egypt and led them over into the Aten.
The last gasp. He's trying to rescue the beauty of ancient Atlantis and Egypt. He's the last try, and then the fucking demonic fucking power mongers just take him down and kill his.
He was probably. By the way, he was probably the real Moses, Akhenaten. But when King Tut tried to do this too, they got a hold of him when he was young, about 9 years old, and said, "Hey, let's mold you back into the theocratic guy that we like that's going to be pushing these Egyptian gods. The priests wanted to take everyone's goods for their grain silos. But we see that again in cycles later on at the time of King Henry VIII with Thomas Cromwell and what he tried to do with the English Reformation. It's the same thing going back into the Ottonism and the Osirian cults and everything, all being repeated in cycles until we get it right. And it's
I agree. Ultimately, in the big
our
picture,
morphogenic field.
Yeah, in the big picture, there's no failure. There's learning and spirals and ever-widening gyres of wisdom. I agree. But that's pretty cool to think of. So what we
we'll
worship...
get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, we are. It's really cool. And Earth is a popcorn god factory. As soon as the popcorn starts popping, and I think we're right at the beginning of it. We're having normal people pop. Eckhart, and Byron Katie and a bunch of others and Yoganandas that actually are clean. They're clean. They don't want to start cults. They don't want anything from you. They don't want you to fucking follow them and kiss their feet. None of that shit. We're done with that stuff. There's a bunch of people living out those guru shit and misuse of power. This is what we're doing right now. But it's a real shot at people seeing through. That's my love. That's why I share that's what I share. It's like, hey, you're God, but yeah, you got some work to do to really get there. This is not easy, but it's a possibility of it. And that's what we're doing. And you and I right now, I hope what this does for people is it shares a human perspective on these obfuscated, long-forgotten veils of Hyperborea or Lemuria and Atlantis that we try to focus on today, or Egypt, that these are we are gods with amnesia.
We are.
And it's beautiful this time because we're coming at it with psychology, we're coming at it with shamanism, we're coming at it with something new and simple. Thank you, Jesus, direct prayer. Buddha, all of them have sown these seeds, this smorgasbord, this melting pot of techniques, Shiva, etc. It's beautiful time. It really can be pretty easy. I've seen it. There's going to come a time when it's, hey, I have an obelisk in the corner, by the way. I should have brought that out. What are we doing?
I forgot to bring out my little Egyptian action figures, but they're always nice to put up into the camera, make them look big.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. There's so much here for us to discover and uncover. We haven't even scratched the surface. So we're gonna have to come back and at least do a Christmas special and some other shows going even deeper into these subjects because what greater pleasure is there than to seek the mysteries? It's absolutely amazing because we unlock these hidden abilities and awarenesses within ourselves.
Yes. And I want to offer some hope. The simpler way. Johnny knows a bunch of stuff. I know a bunch of stuff. You don't have to do it our way. You don't have to, we don't have to do it Solomon's way. You don't have to do it Jesus' way. Source God wants you to do it your way, and it can be very simple. It can be very direct. It can be as easy as when some people have woken up into oneness or some kind of dropping into it. So I'm just feeling to tell people that it's what Yogananda used to say, it's the nearest of the near, it's the dearest of the dear. It's as close as your breath and your heartbeat. And we're learning that. And we can create veils and worlds and timelines and time loops with that little separation from the nearest of the near. It's in that little gap that we create history, right? Which is kind of fun. So, but start realizing now more and more that you are a tree of life. You are a perfect God mechanism. We are. We really are. That's really coming up for me. Your spinal column, all your chakras, you're the most tuned instrument in the galaxy. This is what Shakespeare says, like a god in action, so beauteous in form. I forget where it's from, but that's Bacon, Shakespeare, Saint Germain telling us you are a god.
Yeah, a little homework for people. I don't want to give it away, but look up the spear shakers and what this spear means. I'll give you a hint. We have the Athenian wisdom, the torch of Prometheus of enlightenment. We have even a hidden message in the name of Shakespeare. So look that up. And
I never knew that. I've been doing it, but I never knew that. I call it, here's William shaking his spear at us again when I quote him. You know, I do it that way.
That's right.
But I never knew that till just this moment when you mentioned Athena and Poseidon and tridents and stuff like that.
See, it's all natural there. You see, well, once people realize that our world is not only made of words, we live in a syntactical reality, but we have this language of symbols that's all around us. And most things, most words, expressions, even our laws, to, everything that we look at, all our logos, everything has all got this other symbol that leads to something else and leads within ourselves. It's the journey within. And I think that's beautiful.
God's so tricky, Source is so tricky, Mother is so tricky that you can't outrun them. No matter how far you try to get away, you'll see the goddess on the Starbucks cup or whatever. Right? You know what
That's right.
Which I know is controversial this Christmas, right? Or whatever. I remember hearing something about it. But you can't outrun it because we are, your very body is made of that beautiful symbol, amplituhedron or whatever they're calling it lately. That basic photonical building block that creates the universe, so you can't outrun yourself.
Isn't that beautiful? Now, the new theory is in cosmology. Every week we got a new theory. 1 week we have the Big Bang theory, then we have expansion theory. The new theory is the entire universe was created out of a single light photon with light DNA that came to our universe and had the instructions and arrived. And then go back to what we told you today about the ancient imperial sun cults, about the light photon cross, the Maltese cross, the Templar cross. Go back into what this light of the serpent is and bringing it up through you. And that's what the Tantric awakening, that's what the Kundalini is, but it's absolutely amazing. Yeah. It's been incredible today to sit here and chat with you, my friend, and all of you guys on the other side of the screen.
You're awesome, Johnny. You trigger great stuff. I like your triggering or of details that allows me to go back into history and feel them because you've done that work. It's awesome.
It's amazing how you do that, man. You're able to go so deep. You could take one little piece of history and you're just able to go into it and channel from it and bring out the best details. That's what I love talking to you, man.
I'm lazy, man. I don't want to read the books.
Well, until next time, I'll meet you and everyone else at that place behind our closed eyelids.
Awesome.
Good news.
Cool.
Good news. We actually are on board now. It's unbelievable. Only 57 tries later. And
I'm shutting down all the other windows.
Perfect. You're like, screw this. I'm going to play solitaire for the next hour. Mahjong. What's that game called?
Yeah, Mahjong. I've never done it. I don't understand how it works. All I know it's a communist fucking Chinese block.
Yeah, it almost sounds like Menage a Trois. So it says, hey, I thought we were... No, wrong game.
Wait, isn't Mahjong the giant... Isn't that the fat madam in a Chinese whorehouse? Isn't her name Mahjong? Isn't that the truth?
It sounds about right.
We should include this shit afterwards, like leave a 5-minute gap at the end of the tape, and then we should have some clippings of you and me doing this shit.
We could have all the outtakes.
That'd be awesome.
We have about 40 of them from the last day of high-pitched squealing sounds. It sounds like sounds like cetaceans, or how do you say?
Either that or John Voight in Deliverance.
Oh my God.
No!
That's exactly it, man. That's exactly it. So, You know, I'm very excited
those
about
whale sounds, Daddy. Yeah, those are whale sounds.
Yeah, I mean, there's no Google Translate app for that. It's all strangeness. What did Hunter S. Thompson say? He said, "When the going gets weird, the weird turn pro." So
Did he really say that?
he did, and you know, other colorful quotes.
Never read his stuff. I mean, I know who he is, but I caught snippets, but I never followed the.
He's amazing, man. I love the way his brain worked. It was wired differently. You know, you read his books and you think this guy's just on another planet. Hunter S. saw that writing was like making music, but it's just like his stuff. He carried a tape recorder around him on ridiculous amounts of drugs.
Did you post this or somebody? No, my Swedish crazy Viking guys did. Posted one from Terence McKenna that said psychotics and shamans are the only two people that create their own reality. It has to come from Terence, you know. It's great. You know?
Oh no, absolutely, man. Terence is the king. I mean, he's the legend.